Hey guys, we just spent the last week in 30A. We're going to talk to you about some pros and cons and let you guys decide if it's overrated or not.
Yeah, so 30A has really grown in popularity in the last few years. It seems like everyone is going there. Everyone wants to go there. It's a place that was very under the radar and kind of a hidden gem in Florida for a really long time. Now it's really popular. But even though it's really popular, a lot of our Floridian friends even had never heard of it and had no idea what we were going to go to on vacation when we told them we were going to 30A. So if you're not familiar with 30A, basically it's a highway that runs through the Emerald Coast of Florida. It's literally Highway 30A, and it refers to these little beach communities along that highway. Each of those communities or towns, they have different vibes, and we did videos on most of the main communities in 30A. So Seaside, Alys Beach, Rosemary Beach, and we went to Topsail State Park, which was a definite highlight of the trip. So you can go back and watch those videos. The communities are located on Florida's Emerald Coast, which is in the Panhandle, and they're in between Panama City Beach and Destin. We did take a day trip to Destin, so you can check out that video too. But we are going to go through some pros and cons so you can decide if 30A is worth a visit or if it's overrated. So before we jump into pros and cons, let's get some disclaimers out of the way. So first of all, we did not travel during peak season. 30A popular time is in the summer, so really starting after Memorial Day through Labor Day for the most part. We were there in the middle of winter, so things tend to be cheaper, like accommodations, things like that. It tends to not be as busy. Some of the stores are even shut down for a few weeks out of that time frame. We were there close enough to the holidays that wasn't the case for us. But just so you know, our experience might be a little bit different in terms of busyness and crowds. It was also pretty cold while we were there. So for us, we were a family of 4. It was the 2 of us, our 2-month-old and our 14-month-old. So smaller group. So that's kind of what you can expect. And everything that we are saying is obviously just our opinion and just our experience, which might be a little bit different than your experience based on the time of year that we went and the size of our family.
Okay, so cons. First off, we're going to go, it's pretty expensive pretty much everywhere you go. Mm-hmm. Now, there are a few spots, kind of hidden gems, where you're going to get just like a cold brew or something, and it's going to be, not too bad. But a lot of the restaurants, a lot of the coffee places, mm-hmm. a lot of just like the shops in general are really, really expensive. And that's coming from 2 people that we are tourists. Like, we go places that, even in 30A, we went to Margaritaville. We go to places that normally are going to have a little bit higher price tag, but this place is really, really mm-hmm. expensive in general.
We also live in Tampa Bay, so we are used to higher prices. And I know that saying that something is expensive is really going to depend on where you're from. So if you're watching this from a higher cost of living area, you might be laughing at us.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Absolutely.
But I would say that it is more expensive than most places. I think for most of our meals, because we wanted to try as many restaurants as possible, we would share an entree, and the cost of 2 drinks and an entree were pretty similar to what you might expect for 2 entrees and 2 drinks somewhere else.
Right.
But there is kind of an exception to this, and I think that it's if you visit during off season, which we did, you can get some really good deals on accommodation. So if you're staying in season, your accommodation is going to be pretty expensive as well. Maybe not more expensive than anywhere else you might stay, but it's going to be something you'll probably want to budget for. But we stayed in the off season and we paid pennies compared to what this place would have cost in season. So I think in season our place went for $3,000 a week, and we paid around $1,000 for a week. So timing will make a difference, but in terms of restaurants and coffee, that's going to be the same pretty much year round, and it's going to be pretty expensive, which probably isn't too surprising, coming to a place where tourists like to visit.
Surprisingly, and this is just a little tidbit, the cheapest place I think we went to was this donut shop in, was it Alys Beach?
Yeah, it was in Alys Beach.
Alys Beach, was everything else there was just crazy expensive, but this donut shop, and they had really, really good donuts. It was just I think we just got a glazed donut, but it was so good. And it was only a couple bucks. It was crazy how expensive it was. But that's just kind of funny, just because Alys Beach is everything there was great. Like that is the height of what we mean when we're saying it's expensive. Alys Beach is number one for sure. So.
Alys Beach is known, if you didn't watch our video, it's known for being luxurious, and so it makes sense that it's so expensive.
Right. There are options to make it cheaper. You can go to like a grocery store and get, groceries for the place and have ham and cheese sandwiches. That's not really the vibe we're kind of after, generally speaking. And we're trying to give you guys a look of like, hey, here's what it would be like to travel, and here's some good restaurants. And so we're always trying to push ourselves and go to a nicer place or just somewhere that has good views to kind of show you guys what the vibe is in the area or what's going on there. We don't want to just be like, here's us eating some ham sandwiches at our Airbnb because we're trying to do this on the cheap. So
yeah. But you totally can, especially like on a beach day. That's a great snack to bring to the beach. We love eating out when we're traveling in general, but it's easy not to. So that's an option. And
okay, everything being expensive and everything like that, it brings us right into food, which in my opinion, everything we had there was absolutely delicious. All the food there was amazing. I don't think I had one dish that I was like, oh wow, I'm bummed that I spent that much on it, regardless of how expensive it actually was.
Yeah, and I always do a ton of planning before we go anywhere, and my list of places that I wanted to try in 30A was so long, like, it was crazy. There were so many places I wanted to go, not very many chains. Of course, you can find chains if you're looking, I suppose there's like, a few chains, but for the most part, it's all unique restaurants that are locally owned, small businesses, and no two are quite the same. They're unique, so that was amazing. Like, I feel like it could be a foodie's paradise. I don't know if I'm a foodie. I eat food.
No, but for real, the place, there was all the different restaurants we went to, and even when we were like, hey, let's we have 2 kids, so it's hard sometimes to get to a restaurant, especially if there's a long wait. There's
all levels of eating too. In Seaside, you have the Airstreams, so you can grab cheap food to go. Seaside also has pizza, like a walk-up counter for pizza. But then in Rosemary Beach, you have like the really nice sit down, and Alys Beach, you have really nice sit down options, which is cool. I will say that one con, and you might already know this if you watched our prior videos, even though we like to eat out, we don't necessarily eat at the restaurant now that we have kids. That was just a little bit harder than it used to be. We still wanted to eat at restaurants that were local, but we tried to do it back at the Airbnb. We tried to get a lot of to-go food because this was our first trip with both of our kids. And some nights it was actually kind of hard to find places that had to-go options, because Seaside, for example, parking is difficult, which we'll get into. So we didn't want to necessarily pick up there. Anyways, I don't need to get into like the whole spiel, but just at times pickup was difficult. I think that also depends where you're staying. We were staying in Santa Rosa Beach, and so we couldn't like walk to any place for pickup. If you're staying in the heart of some of these towns, it's going to be really easy for you to find pickup. But
absolutely. If you were staying in Rosemary or you can't really stay in Alys unless you live there, I think. But
I looked that up. Yeah, you can.
Oh, you can?
They have their own rental program.
Oh, that's interesting.
They do not do it through Airbnb or VRBO. They have their own. Yeah.
Oh, that's
interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, that's crazy. But no, if you're staying in one of those towns, obviously you can walk up and get it. But like she said, Seaside, it was tough. You didn't want to like walk a mile, but that kind of brings us into another topic of what is another con, is parking in these towns.
Yeah.
If you get there early, it's
no problem.
Yeah, it's not so bad. If you're getting there before like 9 a.m., which isn't that early, but for some people it is, whatever, to get out and get going, especially in a large group, everyone's showering.
Oh my gosh, yeah. If you have a group of like 15 people, it's going to be hard
tough,
to get going.
Yeah, to get there, park, whatever. But like Seaside, we got there pretty late in the day.
Yeah, we did. It was like lunchtime, I think?
Yeah, like 11, 12 o'clock.
On a weekday.
Yeah, and we're walking, I would say around a little over half a mile for sure. To get to the place. So if you wanted to go there, pick up food to like bring back, now you're walking like, half a mile with food. By the time you get there, it's going to cool down.
Yeah.
It makes it tough, to not eat at the restaurant when you're parking so far away.
We stayed in Santa Rosa.
Oh, Santa Rosa.
So we kind of stayed in like the country a little bit. Like we had like a good, I think it was only like a 5-minute drive to 30A.
Yeah.
So we had to drive everywhere we went, and that worked great for us because it was really quiet. We loved where we stayed. but we had to drive into Seaside. We had to drive into all these towns. If you're staying in these towns and you plan on getting around with your bike or by foot, then that's totally fine. But chances are you're gonna want to experience more than just one of the towns because they're so cute. Trust me, you want to experience more than one. And if you want to do that, you're probably gonna want a car. Now, you can totally rent a bike and get pretty far with a bike, so maybe that's not a problem. For us, we couldn't really rent bikes. With our 2-month-old, that's not something we were ready to do with her yet, and so we did have to drive. Parking was difficult to find. It did cost money. My understanding is that in like the off season, it's free, so it could be a different experience for you. Hopefully it is. That would be really nice. But yeah, parking was pretty challenging, and sorry, were you gonna say something?
No, it was. I totally agree with you. Yeah, I mean, parking was, in certain spots, it was hard. Honestly, one of the easiest spots we found was Alys Beach. We spread on the street. You can kind of just pull over and park. I still am not like 100% sure if they like you doing that, but there was no signs or anything, and there was a ton of other people parked there. It seemed like a weird spot. But
I think they probably don't like you doing it, but they don't have a choice.
Yeah.
And I kind of wanted to talk about transportation as we're talking about parking, and that is getting from town to town. I already touched on this, but a popular way of getting around is by bike. And that's really easy to do if you're staying in like Rosemary Beach, because Rosemary Beach is really close to Alys Beach, and what's that other little town that's over there?
I know, where there was a bunch of bikes.
It's not Seagrove, I think.
Seagrove?
Is it Seagrove?
It might be.
I think it's Seagrove. It's where Peddler's Pavilion is. I will correct that if I'm wrong on the screen. But yeah, so all of those are really close to each other. But then Seaside actually is quite a ways away. I think it could be bikeable.
If you're like a heavy biker, not even heavy, semi-heavy biker, you could get there pretty easily. I mean, you know, small kids and stuff, it'll be tough, but yeah, absolutely. From Alys all the way to Seaside, I think you could do it if you're like a decent biker, yeah. And there's like, I think there's 2 towns in between the two, that Rosemary and...
Do you want to Google how far
Yeah.
away it is from Alys Beach? Actually, do Rosemary Beach to Seaside.
Rosemary. It's still 8.3 miles.
Oh, that's
from
not bad.
Yeah, that's kind of a big bike ride. Still.
Round trip, it could be 8 miles one way.
Yeah.
Depending on your
but it's definitely doable.
So yeah, you could totally do that and not need a car. What I was kind of saying is that there's a bridge that's out on 30A right now, and so to get from Seaside to Rosemary Beach, you have to go all the way around instead of a straight shot. But the reason I think that that's probably not even worth mentioning is that it's supposed to reopen before season starts this summer. Definitely maybe Google that before your trip if it's really coming up. Yeah. That was kind of a pain when we were there.
Yeah, it makes traffic real heavy too, just because you have to go around and that's where everyone's going. And then there's like temporary streetlights set up, and it makes it the traffic.
It's a bummer. Yeah. But it was a necessary repair, and we're glad they're doing that. And it won't be a problem too much longer. So
yeah, I'm not a big fan of going over like faulty bridges, to be honest with you. Okay, so speaking of transportation and travel and all that, we're going to talk about your airport options, which is going to be Panama City Beach or Destin, which they aren't honestly that far apart, and you know what I mean when you're looking at it, but the Uber ride from each one of those, or if you're in a car, whatever your option is going to be kind of a longer Uber ride. Like it's going to be about 35-40 minutes depending on where you're staying. But yeah, I mean that's going to get a little expensive, and isn't to me that's kind of a little bit of a con for flying in. I wish they had like a little bit better airport system.
Yeah, for sure. It was such a small area that's growing, and so the airports are pretty small. So like Allegiant is a budget airline, and it does fly into Destin. Allegiant only has direct flights, so that could be a great option for you. But otherwise, sometimes those small airports can be difficult to find good options for flights. And then on top of that, to have to rent a car or arrange an Uber, that can be a con depending on your situation. And again, it's going to depend on where you're staying in 30A and which airport you fly into, because there's a wide spread in 30A. So it might take 30 minutes, it might take an hour, depending on traffic, depending on when you fly in, that sort of thing. But that's something to consider. It's definitely not like a major airport like we have here in Tampa.
Right. And one nice thing is, though, like from the airport, at least, you know what, and I can't even say this just because we were there in off season, traffic on the main highways wasn't that bad, even during like rush hour or traditional rush hour times. But I assume that kind of ramps up during...
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, during busy season, that's going to be probably tough. But again, we're also dealing with that bridge being down and
good point.
A number of other things.
Yeah,
so.
And it's so cool because once you get there, you can be there. We did a lot of driving because we had to, but if you stay in one of those main areas, everything you need is going to be walking distance, biking distance. So we already covered this like a little bit when we talked about walking in between the towns and biking in between the towns, but all of the towns are designed with new urbanism, which is basically a fancy word for saying that the towns are designed in a way that makes sense. So they're designed to be walkable in a way that brings everyone together in community so that you can walk to a grocery store, so that you can walk to events, the beach, and so on. And I do think that like most of the towns do have like a small little general store that's easy to walk to, so you don't really need a car, you don't need anything once you're there. And that is a huge pro. They are so walkable, and especially if you have a bike, you can get anywhere.
No, for sure. Everything is very walkable. Once you're in that town, it's all open, and it seems like everything's kind of like everything was designed almost like, you know how like amusement parks and casinos are all like designed so you can like go to this one area and it's like, here's the one big thing. It's
such a good analogy.
Almost like every town is designed, it's for you to like open up into this big view that you see, and it's like, oh my gosh, look at here, you know, whether that be the water or just the unique architecture.
And the theater.
Yeah, exactly. Like the unique architecture that's there is incredible. And a lot of that's just because this area is very, very new. So it's like everything is a brand new building. They spend a lot of time picking out like architectures and how they want the city laid out. You can just very much tell they spent a lot of time picking how the city will be walkable and what they want people to see when they're there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But that also kind of brings us to the strollers are hard to use there if you have kids, which this might be a problem just for, you know, us and the parents out there. This isn't everybody, but everything is like cobblestone and brick, and like our strollers and, you know, the babies are just like jumping around just like little bobbleheads in there, and that's just like, you know, whatever. We
have very little babies, and so maybe if you have like a 3-year-old who thinks it's funny, no problem.
Right, but like little tiny babies on this cobblestone street that's just like shaking their head all around. It's just like, you know. But it is super walkable, and that's really the only downside to, as far as like it is walkable.
And I wonder if, like, I'm curious if that's like an unpopular opinion. We actually kind of thought it was not very stroller friendly.
Yeah.
But I feel like that almost has to be an unpopular opinion, only because it is such a family friendly destination.
Oh yeah,
like,
absolutely.
Everywhere you look are families. Everywhere you look are
Yeah, but even the stores and stuff, some of like there's a clothing store there that don't have a dang ramp up to their door. Like the door, you have to like carry the stroller into it, and it's like, what? Like half the stuff is like that. The curbs aren't super friendly for strollers. Like there'll be crosswalks that lead you right to a curb. There's no like, ramp or anything. So you're like carrying your stroller halfway, and it's all cobblestone on the way there. So it's just, I don't know what, like obviously that's not like a thing on everybody's mind. It's just me because I have little kids and I'm strollering everywhere.
But for as much planning as they put into this city, it's interesting that for such a family-friendly destination that has so much planning put into the design, that it would be so unfriendly towards strollers.
Not only strollers, but handicapped people as well. Like you're dealing with like wheelchairs and, you know, old elderly people that need it's just, it is a problem in my opinion that like is... Just pave it. You know, I love how brick looks good. We all know it, but pave the dang thing.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Another pro of how they really did a good job with like designing the towns is that there were actually quite a bit of public restrooms. So each town, for the most part, had some sort of public restroom, which is very much appreciated when you get a bunch of tourists in one spot. You don't always find that, but every town had somewhere, I think, that made it easy to find a place to use the restroom if you needed to.
And on each corner, they were located like pretty good. Like I remember being in like a ways away from like the center of town, and they still had like a couple of bathrooms near like the beach entrance, and like it was really nice and convenient. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Speaking of beach entrances, that is kind of, this may not affect you. This may be a pro or a con depending on your situation. There are not a lot of public beach entrances in 30A.
Yeah.
Most of the beach entrances are private. You will see a ton of beach entrances as you wander through the different towns, as you bike, as you walk. There's tons of them, but they're almost all private. Yep. So you have to be renting a house or a condo that gives you access to those, and they do monitor them pretty closely. So you're gonna want to do your research and make sure that your Airbnb or whatever you're renting has access to the beach if that is an important part of your vacation. And the reason I say that this might not even be a con is that I think most of them do. So it probably won't affect you, but we had no idea. And if that had been a really important part of our vacation, we would have been pretty disappointed.
Yeah.
Again, we were visiting in January. It was freezing, so it was totally fine. We also live at the beach, so no big deal. But that is something worth looking into if it's a big, important part of your vacation.
And they're not like just blocked off like, oh hey, you can't go there. There's like a security code, like a fence with like pointies. They are not letting you in there. There's no hopping it. It's like a no-go. It's not like you can sneak down at night and just like hop across. They are very much not letting anyone in there. You feel like, it's very much private for sure.
Yeah. With accommodations, I think a huge pro of 30A is that there are almost endless accommodations. You can find places that literally will sleep like 20 people. There are humongous mansions that you can rent, or you can be like us and rent a smaller house. You can even go smaller than us and rent a condo that's almost like a studio. So no matter how many people are in your party going to 30A, you are definitely going to find an accommodation for you. Now, a con of this is that there were so many options. I was so overwhelmed. I've been wanting to go to 30A for years, and every time I think what's kind of held us back from like actually doing it is that when I started to research places, I got overwhelmed. There are so many options. It can be overwhelming. And that might not be a problem if you're decisive, but it was difficult for me. But still a good thing, right? Like it's a good thing that you can find accommodation.
Yeah, it was awesome. But you can also see, like, to piggyback on what she said, the groups that are there kind of just makes you, I don't know, it feels fun. Like everyone's like there. Some people are wearing like matching shirts to show like who they're with or whatever. But it's cool walking around and just seeing these large groups of families just like enjoying themselves and like just being outside and not, whatever. It's a cool area, and a lot of cool people go there. It's really fun.
Yeah. Definitely cool people go there.
Definitely.
Okay, so I want to talk about what we thought 30A was going to be before we went. I had been dying to get to 30A for years. I wanted to go so bad. I thought it was going to be the ultimate place. So excited. Do you remember what you thought 30A was going to be?
I do, yeah, absolutely. I thought it was going to be very similar to where we live right now, where it was going to be like Clearwater, Indian Rocks, Treasure Island, Reddington, whatever. I thought it was going to be like towns like that with like one single road that was like beachfront the whole time.
And it's weird because it is.
It is,
but
that,
it isn't
it's
at all.
Very much
it's so
not
different.
That. Yeah. The towns are very much separate.
Mm-hmm.
They are not connected in any way. It's not like there's like homes between them. It is heavily wooded, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, here's another town.
I'll be interested to see what that looks like in years from now, because it is growing so fast. Yeah. I think that when I was planning it, you used the word touristy, and you thought it was going to be kind of like a tourist trap.
Yeah, which, and I love Clearwater, but that's what I meant when I say I thought it was going to be like the Clearwater experience. It's just like heavy chain, heavy like
gimmicky,
populated area of like not unique in any way, kind of is what I thought. But and Clearwater's unique too, but I kind of thought it was going to be a little bit gimmicky. I thought it was going to be more, and hate to say Destin, but I thought it was going to be more like what I pictured when I arrived at Destin. I was like, oh, this is what I thought this whole thing was going to be like. Yeah. And it's definitely not. It is very unique and very cool.
So I think what you mean by that is like the oh my goodness. I think what you mean by that is like the big, humongous gift shops that are kind of all the same, and the same 3 restaurants that look all the same that like import their
they're like,
fish.
oh,
It's not even fresh fish. That's kind
exactly.
of and those are really fun places to visit, and there's a place for them for sure. We love them.
Oh, I love getting drinks at those. The fancy drinks are the best at those places.
But 30A is not that. 30A is so unique. It's more unique than I thought it was going to be. And so I wanted to ask you, do you think 30A is overrated?
Overrated? I think it's almost, and this is kind of a cop-out, but like perfectly rated. I don't think a lot of people know about it. If anything, it's a little underrated. I just don't think that many people know about it. Think like above or below it. I personally, in my experience, thought before I went there, I was like, this is gonna be overrated, and then it totally wasn't. It was exactly what we needed. It was great.
I wonder if those like previous expectations impacted it too. Like if you go into it thinking it's going to be the best place ever, maybe that leaves room for disappointment. Whereas if you go in like we did with kind of no expectation, even though I said I was really excited for years, so maybe, I don't know. But anyway, if you go in with no expectation, then, but yeah, I agree. I think it's perfectly rated. I think 30A is incredible. Like, I don't think that there's anywhere quite like it, personally.
Very
unique. It's not like, the nice restaurants that are unique and like the walkability and the beach that's right there, I love it. I don't think that 30A is overrated.
I don't either.
Let us know what you think in the comments. And this is the end of our 30A series. This has been going on for quite a while, and I hope that you've enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed visiting, as much as we enjoyed sharing it with you. And we will be in a new destination next week.